EA Sports announced the first fan poll to decide the next alter ego added to UFC 5. Voting officially begins in-game July 23. I'll be staying tuned to see how that goes, but in this one, I'll be focusing on 16 fighters from the 90s and 2000s who aren't at the top of most people's lists and ranking their chances of being added doubtful, maybe, or likely, with a brief analysis as to why. Starting off with Tim Sylvia, the Maniac. Two-time UFC heavyweight champion, defeated Andrei Arlovski twice, who deserves an alter ego of his own. I give Tim's chances doubtful due to lack of demand. Josh Barnett, the War Master. He was the youngest champion in UFC heavyweight history, also fought in Pride, Pancrase, Strikeforce. I give his chance doubtful. He left UFC due to issues with USADA, might not be on the best terms with the UFC. Randy Couture, the Natural. Six-time UFC champion in the heavyweight and light heavyweight division. He's a UFC Hall of Famer. However, his chance of being added, in my opinion, doubtful. He does commentary for the PFL, and recently he was not happy with the result of the UFC antitrust lawsuit settlement. He wants fighters to be paid more. Fair enough. Sammy Schilt fought most of his career in Pancrase, also competed in Pride, brief stint in the UFC. I give his chance of being added doubtful due to not enough demand or notable achievements. Antonio Minotauro Nogueira, UFC interim heavyweight champion, along with being a UFC Hall of Famer. I give Big Nog's chance a maybe. He made a decent impact in the UFC. He has moderate fanfare and notoriety, and it seems he left the UFC on good terms. Kazushi Sakuraba, the Gracie Hunter, the first man to defeat Hoyler and Royce Gracie, and he also defeated Renzo and Ryan Gracie, which gave him the nickname the Gracie Hunter. He is a UFC Hall of Famer, so I give his chance of being added likely. He's a legend and pioneer. Igor Vovchanchin, ice cold, holds the record for longest winning streak in MMA history and also has the second most KOs in MMA history. I give his chance of being added doubtful. He's in low demand, despite being a legend of his era, and it would be cool to see a guy like that added. Frank Mir, UFC heavyweight champion, most submissions in UFC heavyweight history, along with the fastest submission in UFC heavyweight history. I give his chance of being added a maybe. He left on amicable terms, it seems, and his UFC has an NIL deal with his daughter Bella Mir. Kung Lee, Strikeforce middleweight champion, sweet as Sanshao Kung Fu style, but I give his chance doubtful as he's not on good terms with the UFC. He was a part of the antitrust lawsuit, and he might not be being added to the game, but hopefully he got a good payday from that settlement. Mirko Krokop, the only fighter in Pride history to consecutively defeat 3 former UFC heavyweight champions. He has the most finishes out of any fighter under the Zuffa umbrella. I give his chance of being added a maybe. He has a lot of fanfare, one of the most popular fighters on this list. It's all just if UFC can work out a deal. Frank Shamrock, UFC light heavyweight champion, fastest submission in the history of the light heavyweight division. He went 5-0 in the UFC. He was also the first MMA fighter to win championships in the UFC, WC, and Strikeforce. I give his chance doubtful. He's not in much demand, although he is very deserving in my opinion, but that's up to UFC brass. Would say it's doubtful. Ken Shamrock, however, UFC Hall of Famer. He was the UFC Superfight Champion, which was eventually rebranded the UFC Heavyweight Champion. He did try and sue UFC for breach of contract. Allegedly, they squashed that dispute, so I give his chance of being added to the game likely. Dong Hyun Kim, the Stun Gun. 2014 KO of the Year winner with the first ever spinning elbow knockout in UFC history. He was the first Korean to win in the UFC. I give his chance of being added maybe. Seems he left on good terms. Despite not being in super high demand for his alter ego, I think he had a sick run in the UFC. He was a pioneer of Asian MMA, and that would be a really cool alter ego to be added. Mark Hunt competed in Pride, UFC, tied third for most bonuses in UFC history. He was a K1 champion, king of the walk-off KO. However, his chance of being added is doubtful. With the lawsuits and hatred Mark has for the UFC, it's a shame to see a fan favourite like him upset. Mark deserves the alter ego in the game. Due to the impact he made and the fanfare he gained, people want him in the game. If everyone stormed Dana's comments like they did with the silly oil comments, anything's possible. Whatever's happening in court, the UFC can literally almost make anything happen if they really want to. So hey, everyone get on Dana's back. Let's get Mark Hunt in the game. However, I give his chance doubtful. Takanori Gomi, the Fireball Kid. Pride 2005 Lightweight Grand Prix champion. Pride's only light heavyweight champion. He has a knockout win over Jens Pulver, who was recently added. I give his chance of being added to UFC 5 a maybe. He has moderate fanfare, Japanese MMA icon, and it would be great to see the Fireball Kid added to the game. Finally, Don Fry, the Predator. He's a UFC Hall of Famer, along with many other accolades. Also competed in Pride. I give his chance of being added likely. He's one of the highest demand fighters on this list, and I think the UFC could work out a deal with him. So that's my 16 fighters from the 90s and 2000s whose potential alter egos are going under the radar. If you have any other fighters from that era whose alter ego you believe is also going under the radar, or disagree with the chance I've given anyone to be added, let me know in the comments. Other than that, walk off KO that like button for me. I'm the Primetime Feline, and I hope I see you in the next one. Peace.